So we've had practice already earlier on building triads on all the degrees of the major and the minor scale. But now we know that we don't have to just build chords that only have 3 notes in. We now know about 4-note chords. So what we just wanted to do was spend a bit of time building 4-note chords up from the triads, missing out every other note, but continuing on. So we've got the first one, we miss out one, we've got another one, we miss out one, we've got another one, we miss out one, and then we're going to put another one in as well. We're going to do that for every scale degree and see what quality of chords emerge when we do that.
So let's start in a major key, first of all. And again, we're going to use C, just because it's a nice easy one to show on the piano. So, as Nikki said, we've got the 1st degree, 3rd degree, 5th degree, and the 7th degree. And actually, what we see is we've got the major triad that we're familiar with, but we've also got the interval of a major 7th from the root to the 7th. A major triad with a major 7th is a major 7 chord. Okay, the chord built on the 2nd degree is a minor triad with a minor 7th, and we're going to call that a minor 7th chord. That's the same for chord 3, we've got a minor 7th chord. Chord 4, we have a major 7 chord, so we've got a major triad with F to E in this case, which is a major 7th at the outside, so a major triad with a major 7th is a major 7th chord. Then we've got a major triad, but this time we've got a major triad with a minor 7th, and this is called a dominant 7th chord. It's
called a dominant 7th chord because it's a 4-note chord built up from chord 5, from the dominant, and it's the one that you recognise. It's the dominant 7th chord, and it's got important features in it. It's got a 4 that wants to move to a 3, and a 7 that wants to move to a 1. The reason it's got that going on is because that's where the semitones fall, and you'll remember that. So it wants to resolve the dominant 7th. It wants to take us back to the tonic, and that's what distinguishes it.
Okay, so that's chord 5, and you'll remember we talked about that as having a really important function. Moving on to 6, we've got a minor triad, again with a minor 7th. We now know that this is a minor 7th chord. And then if we move on to chord 7, we said that that was a diminished triad, and it is, but actually when we add the 7th on, we have a minor 7th between the root and the 7th. So a diminished triad with a minor 7th is what's known as a half diminished chord. So let's just reiterate that. On chord 1, we've got a major 7th. Chord 2, we've got a minor 7th. Chord 3, we've got a minor 7th. Chord 4, we've got a major 7th. Chord 5, we've got that all-important dominant 7th. Chord 6, we've got our minor 7th. And chord 7 is a half diminished chord. We've included some supplementary material that not only explains this, but it also shows you some common chord symbols that are used, particularly in pop music and jazz.
All right, that was the major scale. That was building 7th chords on every single degree of the major scale. So now you know what we're going to do. We're going to do the same thing again, but building 7th chords on every degree of the harmonic minor scale. We'll use A minor.
Okay, so if we look at this, we know that we've got a minor triad. But actually, if we use a harmonic minor, we've got a major 7th. So we're going to call this a minor major 7th. Okay. Moving on, we've got a half diminished chord, so that's our minor triad with, that's our diminished triad with a minor 7th, that's half diminished. Moving on, we've got that nice augmented sound that we got when we built the triad on chord 3, but this time we've got a major 7th with it, so this is an augmented major 7th. Chord 4, we get our minor triad with a minor 7th, so that's a minor 7th chord. Chord 5, we've got a major triad with a minor 7th. We've spoken about this as being our dominant 7th chord.
So, as in the major scale, we've got that same pattern of intervals which contains in it those 2 important pulls. It's got a 7 that wants to move to a 1, and it's got a 4 that wants to move to a 3. That's when we're thinking about it in its key context. So here, we've got this chord 5 with a 7th on it, and it wants to move to this chord 1. When it does that, it's got a pull, or it's got this pull that wants to resolve in that fashion.
And this is really important. This is why our dominance is so important within the key. So that was chord 5, a dominant 7th. Moving on to chord 6, we've got a major triad with a major 7th, so we get a major 7th chord. And then we've got a diminished triad, but with a diminished seventh, and this is called a diminished seventh chord. Okay, so let's just reiterate that. If we go back to chord 1, we've got minor major seventh, chord 2, half diminished, chord 3, augmented major seventh, chord 4, minor seventh, chord 5, dominant seventh, chord 6, major seventh, and chord 7 is our diminished seventh chord.
So let's sum up. Back in lecture 2, you heard how a given scale can lead our ears to hear one note out of the whole scale as being the most important or defining note, as being the key note. In this lecture, we've seen how a similar perceptual effect can happen with groups of notes, with triads and with chords.
So we started off by looking at triads and looking at how the notes work together to give us qualities. So we said things like the chord was major, or minor, or augmented, or diminished. And then we took that one step further by adding another degree. We added the seventh, so it was a 4-note chord, and we looked at the qualities that we got from these chords.
So finally, what we've seen in this lecture is how the putting together of those chords can give us really important and very strong structural effects, how the harmonic structures that arise from especially chords like the tonic, the dominant and the subdominant, how these are really commonly used together to create overall structures that reinforce our sense of key, that reinforce our sense of tonality, of tonal centre. And we've seen how other chords can be used to elaborate and extend that harmonic structural experience.
So just remember to have a look at the supplementary material that is on this lecture's webpage. In the next lecture, what you're going to go on to do is look more at chords within keys and how they actually work together.